Welcome to the program. I'm Roby Brock, joined by Congressman Rick Crawford. He represents Arkansas's 1st Congressional District. He's up for re-election this year. Congratulations to you, and thank you for being here in the studio. I don't get to sit down with you.
We don't get to do it very often. Yeah, we've done a few connections, satellite and Skype and things like that.
We won't have a 2-second delay on this one. Although I've got the guys on the button back there with a 7-second delay, just in case
this
something
gets out of
happens
control.
There. That's right. So,
yeah.
Quickly catch me up on how are things with your wife and your kids, and you're on the trail a lot, and you're also in Washington a lot, and how's everything going there?
Really busy. My wife stays busy. She works, and she's on a couple of boards, and kids went back to school.
How old are your kids now?
My son's 13. My daughter is 10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, they grew up in this.
Great ages.
And so my son's playing football. My daughter is staying busy with dance, and Stacy is Ubering them around town and working and doing board stuff, so she stays busy.
It's tough, all this, wearing all these different hats and everything. I have 15 and 11-year-olds and then a 23-year-old too, who got married this summer, by the way. So wait till you get to that experience.
I don't look forward to that.
All right, let's talk some business here. You're on the conference committee for the Farm Bill. When do you expect we will see a final product, and what do you think will be, what are you working for Arkansas in that?
Well, the first formal meeting of the conferees will be September 5th. So what's taking place right now is a lot of staff-to-staff machinations, which always happens in a conference like this. I've been on the conference committee for the previous Farm Bill and for 2 highway bills, and so there's an awful lot of stuff going on staff-to-staff. So the formal meeting will be over on the Senate side on September 5th. And we'll go around the room and let the senators make a bunch of awesome statements.
They're just senators. And what they have to say doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So with the exception of Senator Bozeman, who's on the conference committee, who will be doing great work for us here in Arkansas, and so he and I are working together to really deliver on some things here. On the commodity title, not a lot of changes. So we went. We were really focused in on trying to make sure we didn't lose anything on our reference prices, and that was a real concern with regard to rice in particular, because there was a move to raise the reference price on Japonica, the western states. Well, California is the only one that produces, and
real quick, what's the reference price? I'm not sure.
That is under price loss coverage. There are these reference prices set so that when a market goes below that prescribed level, then they would get assistance. I forget what the price is for rice. It's like $14 a hundred, I believe. And so we're below reference, so we're going to trigger payments. But the other commodities are at or above reference price, so we probably won't see any kind of payments triggered as a result of that. But so we're keeping the reference prices the way they are. Like I said, short grain tried to, and they did get an increase, but it wasn't at the expense of medium and long grain, so southern rice is protected. All right,
now we have seen on Friday perhaps a delay in what was expected to be a USDA mitigation package of $12 billion that was going to help farmers. There's been a lot of discussion about where kind of the price points may be per bushel on some of that. $1.65 is where I'm kind of centering some media reports. Just based on how Arkansas farmers rotate crops, the mixture that we've got in there, are they going to come out ahead on this?
Well, I've got some reservations about this. Number one, the way this would work out is what we understand right now, without having the details published. What we understand that rice would be in a buy-up, so there wouldn't be any additional money per se, but that USDA would buy up surplus commodity under the auspices of market displacement. So that's part of it. The other commodities, there is a per bushel assessment basically, but my problem is this. This is why we have a farm bill. The programs are in place. If you fall below reference price, that would trigger a payment. And so we already have those programs in place. So I'm a little bit concerned about the $12 billion aid package.
You don't think we need it?
I don't think we need it. I think it's comforting if you're a farmer to know that the president comes out and says, hey, we got this $12 billion aid package, so if China really wants to play hardball, we got this as a backstop. But I think that's really all it is, because under our current policy and with the markets being what they are right now, you wouldn't receive a payment anyway. And so if you go back to March, we were looking at planted acre estimates and looking at what we perceived to be, what the market perceived to be probably a big crop. Markets were going to go down anyway. I mean, that's simple supply and demand.
Sure.
And so to point at the tariffs and say the tariffs have created this $2 drop in prices, no, that was factored in way back in March before the decision to implement tariffs was ever made. So farmers were probably expecting, based on increased planted acres, and probably really good high quality crop, which we're especially good at here in Arkansas.
I don't want to misinterpret you, but are you saying you don't think the tariffs have had any impact on the prices?
I don't think they really have. I think what you saw in the short term, China comes out and they might short the market immediately and drive price down quicker than they might have already gone. And they do that because they're going to take advantage of shorting the market and then buying up in cash, and then they've made the money on the short sell plus buying in the cash market as they depress prices. But what we're seeing also, while this was all taking place, Argentina had a crop failure. They had a drought down there, and they're the #3 exporter. China is the #1 importer, 95.5 million acres projected for the balance for fiscal 18. So need about 20 million bushels to round out this year.
It will circuitously make its way, is
Yes.
what you're suggesting.
So what I'm saying is, directly or indirectly, U.S. soybeans will make it to China. Now, Argentina would have to buy up some U.S. soybeans to fill their commitments. China already bought U.S. soybeans after the tariffs were implemented at no tariff. The EU, a very prickly trade partner, #2 in exports, a very distant second, 14.5 million projected for this year. We did a big deal with the EU. They bought up some because we were at a discount to Brazilian soybeans, so they did that just because the economics dictated they could save money. Then they come out and make the deal with Trump, zero tariff coming and going that specifically mentioned soybeans. We're going to probably capture the lion's share of the EU market right now at about 13%. I suspect we're going to get up into 20-25% as a single exporter. That's pretty significant for us.
You mentioned drought earlier in Argentina. There was a drought in Iraq also, which is going to lead to some short-term gains, at least for Arkansas rice.
We just did a deal on 30 million metric tons, or 30 million, I wish 30 million, 30,000 metric tons of rice, which is about a quarter of their market. If my data is right, I think that's about a quarter of their market. I have dealt with them personally over the years. They are very difficult to deal with. We put money into Iraq and then they go buy rice from some other country, and that personally chaps me. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this deal is done and we're going to see 30,000 metric tons of U.S. rice going into Iraq.
I'm going to quote you from an op-ed that you sent our way within the last few weeks. Appreciate that. You said, "The president sending a message to the global community that we are not going to get kicked around anymore. This is a long game," as it suggests with the tariffs and the trade wars that we've seen here. Can farmers play a long game?
I think they can. I think what we're seeing right now is a very strategic patience being exhibited by farmers. And I've talked to an awful lot of them. As you know, I've kind of grown up in the ag industry. I've worked in the ag industry in a variety of capacities. And so you can imagine I got a lot of people have my cell number. And so they call me and they say, "Look, we think this is the right thing. We're going to endure some short-term discomfort." But even when you talk about short-term discomfort, we're already seeing the markets moving back up in a positive trajectory. They got down below 850. We're hovering around 9 right now.
Sure.
When harvest rolls around, it stands to reason you'll probably see that go down, but reference is like $7.99. $7. So we're not going to see a reference price in this scenario.
And there were some farmers who locked into some
exactly.
futures
I talked to a
contracts
bunch that booked at 10,
right? Yeah,
that booked at 10, 10.5, and so I don't think we're going to get to 10.50 by harvest. But I do think that we're going to continue to hover around the $9 range. So if, I think we're in a point now where farmers are going to book. They're trying to play it smart. Yeah, they'd like to get an extra $1 a bushel if they can get it, or even be awesome if you get a couple dollars a bushel. But the old saying goes, bears make money, bulls make money, and hogs get slaughtered. So when you're waiting around for that extra 25 cents and you watch the markets fall $2, you've left some money on the table, and it's hard to get that back.
Apologize to all of our non-farming watchers here. They just got their education for the day on this one. Let's shift gears and talk about some developing news on Friday. John McCain, senator from Arizona, comes out to say that he is not going to continue his brain cancer treatment, which is pretty much a death sentence here. He's been a punching bag for the president, but he is definitely one of America's military heroes there. What's your take on John McCain? What do you think his legacy is?
Well, I think he is leaving a very storied legacy of a patriot that could have taken the easy way out, if you want to call it that, when he was a prisoner of war, but he wouldn't leave. He wouldn't be the first to leave. He would be the last to leave, and that was his commitment to the people there. As there's a code of conduct with the military. When you're taken prisoner, you follow that code of conduct. He assumed a command position as an officer, and he was doing everything he could to be a leader in that 7-year stint in the Hanoi Hilton. And so that's something that'll never be forgotten. It's always to be respected. And whatever the political differences that might separate individuals, that is something that will always be remembered as probably one of his strongest elements of his legacy. But he's been a stalwart in the Senate. Don't always agree with him. In fact, probably
he is a maverick. He likes to tout himself
sure.
as that. So.
And so I think that's kind of what sets him apart. He's definitely his own man.
Yeah. You are on the Intel Committee, the House Intelligence Committee. You and Representative Devin Nunes, who's coming to the district in early September for a fundraiser for you, y'all have been in Azerbaijan. I know you're restricted in telling me many details, but tell me why that trip and what was the purpose of it?
Well, it's right on the Caspian Sea. And it's unique because Azerbaijan is the only country in the world that has a border with Russia and a border with Iran. And so if you've ever been there, it's a very wealthy country by world standards, and particularly in the region because of the energy riches that they have there. So it's a very modern kind of country, very secular. I mean, it's a secular government. It's Muslim, but it's very secular. What they're trying to do is to move that gas that they have access to in the Caspian Sea along the southern route on a pipeline that would terminate in Italy. And it goes through some countries, and we visited some of those countries while we were there as well. Some issues there, with some of the neighboring nations like Armenia and the influence with Russia and Armenia. Obviously, when you get into Georgia, we've got the issues there that, the contested areas where Russia has occupied portions of Georgia, up to 20% of that nation. And then we were in Romania as well. And so not only were we, there to kind of talk about those energy issues and the role that Russia is playing to kind of try and subvert that, they're engaged in an active measures campaign in Italy trying to get the environmentalists and elected officials to say no to that pipeline terminating in Italy. It's good for us strategically and for Europe because it gives them an alternate source of energy besides the Russian pipelines.
Gotcha.
And so that was the initial thrust, the primary thrust of the visit.
Gotcha. You mentioned Russia. You were on the House Intel Committee that has ended its investigation into Russia there. You were one of the supporters voting to close that investigation down. There have been some things that have come out subsequent to you guys closing that down. Did you guys close the investigation down too early?
No, I don't think so. I think that we have very limited scope and resources. We're not part of the judicial branch, and so there was in our scope, and we're not part of the judiciary. So for what we were was available to us, the resources available, and the charter that we had with regard to conducting this investigation, I think it was appropriate. The findings that we came up with support that there was no Russia collusion. What we also found is that there was certainly Russia interference. But John Brennan said that in an open hearing, and we know this has been going on for decades. So there's really kind of no news there. We knew going in, expect to find evidence of Russian meddling, which we did. But the collusion still seems to be, kind of the divisive issue. And there are folks that say, look, President Trump colluded. If there was evidence of President Trump colluding with the Russians, you can bet it would have been leaked by now. Because one of my colleagues on the House Intelligence Committee, the ranking member Schiff, he leaves every hearing and goes straight to a camera. And so I can say with confidence that if they had anything to indicate, and they had every opportunity, just as we did, to bring forth any evidence of collusion, and they didn't.
Yet the Mueller investigation continues, and it could still turn up some evidence of collusion.
Well,
if that is the case, do you think the House Intel Committee could reopen its investigation, or would it just be left in the special
I think it probably needs to be left in the
hands?
special prosecutor's lane. And I tell you, he's got the resources. In fact, he's expended millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to date. Somewhere we're approaching 18 months on. And so I think at this point in time, if you've got the evidence of collusion, I think now's the time to bring it forward. I think what we've seen with Manafort, who is no choir boy, and Cohen, who also is no choir boy, I think it was appropriate to say, hey, look, we've got some illegal activity here. It needs to be adjudicated. However, I think that should have been referred out of the special counsel's lane because his charter is Russia collusion.
He did pass some of it off. He passed Cohen off to the Southern District of New York.
Right, he did, but Manafort was tried very publicly, and everything associated with Manafort was done very publicly in Northern Virginia within that jurisdiction and under the auspices of the Russia collusion charter. And I think that's where he has kind of come under fire as, questioning the credibility here because that's fine. That's a separate issue. Go and prosecute that, and we'll just live with that.
His charter was to investigate other crimes that he might uncover in his search for
Well,
Russian
and this
collusion.
is sort of one of the problems with special prosecutors. As we've seen historically, they have very wide, narrowly defined parameters. And it gives them a whole lot of subjective authority to wander into areas that might not be what we had originally intended for them to investigate.
So separate from the special prosecutor, but I got to ask you because it is making headlines all week this week. Michael Cohen has pleaded in a court hearing that he was directed by the president to make these hush money payments to a porn star and to a Playboy model. Wherever you think that the money came from campaign funds, from Trump personally, or from a third party and reimbursed by Trump, it does seem to indicate that a felony crime has been committed there. The president's tied to that.
If there is evidence, and it's proven in a court of law, that he misused campaign funds to pay for a non-disclosure agreement, then yeah, that's going to have to be prosecuted and it's going to have to be dealt with. But it's a non-disclosure agreement is not illegal. We may find it repugnant. I'm not happy with this. I'm not condoning this. I think there are some moral questions that this raises, but the legal question, this is a non-disclosure agreement within the confines of the law. If he paid with his own funds or even corporate funds, it's a legal non-disclosure agreement. The question is now, is there evidence that shows campaign funds were expended to execute this non-disclosure? And if that turns out to be the case, now we've got a crime.
Would that lead to potential impeachment, at least the discussion of it?
I'm not sure. And as far as the discussion of it, it's been a discussion since, November 6th of last year, or 2016. So yeah, the impeachment discussion has never stopped since he won the election. So that's going to continue. My
job is to try to nail you down on this so you understand. So, would you support impeachment if there is a high crime that is determined that the President of the United States committed?
And I can't answer that today. And I tell you why I can't answer that today is because just to arbitrarily say, go prove a crime and I'll support impeachment. I'm not sure that I'm in a position to answer that question today.
You want the circumstances?
Under the circumstances. I would like to say that if an elected official commits a crime and impeachment charges are brought against them for that reason, then that's probably indicated. But we don't know, and I'm not going to speculate.
All right. He is Congressman Rick Crawford. He represents the 1st Congressional District. Good to be with you.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
You
Appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.